Welcome to the Portalcast.
Let the games begin.
In 3, 2,
Hello, welcome to the Portal 2 cast, the only show dedicated to make you better at building Portal 2 puzzles. Today I want to do something just a little bit different because so far on the show I've evaluated a few tests, but I haven't really addressed what makes a very good test. And I want to take a minute today and just show you what makes a great test, or just talk about what makes a great test, at least to me. And feel free to disagree with my opinion. Everybody likes something different. That's all right, but obviously, if this is my show, I'm going to devote it to what I think makes a great test. And so, what does make a great test? And these are things that the community has kind of rallied around too. So it's not just me alone, even though these are my opinions and you can ignore them. It's not only my opinions. Let's just think for a minute about some of the possible things you could put in your test that might make it better or worse. Do you need to be a good hammer editor? Do you have to have the threat of death? Do you need lighting? Does your chamber have to be large? Does it have to be difficult? Do you need to throw a companion cube somewhere? How many elements do you need? Do you have to play test it? And what should your layout look like? Let's have a look. First of all, you don't have to be a great hammer editor. You don't need... Hammer is a wonderful tool. You can make flashy, wonderful, beautiful maps if you take the time to learn Hammer. I personally haven't. And I think that's okay. And I've played tests by people that you can tell they were done in the PTI. You didn't need Hammer to make them, and they're fantastic tests. So you don't need Hammer. Second on the list of things you don't need is you don't have to have the threat of death. GLaDOS once questioned whether it was real science without the threat of death, but you don't have to. There are plenty of tests in the single-player game where there is no threat of death anywhere, that there's not bottomless pits. I mean, those are in some places, sure, but there are plenty of entertaining tests that require a leap of intuition to solve and that are lots of fun to play, and you don't need death to get there. You don't need lots of elements, and I'm going to prove this to you by loading a couple of tests that you'll see. You don't need huge chambers. The inclination of a lot of people when they first get in the Puzzle Maker is just to widen the walls, raise the ceiling, and make a huge chamber. People like to make these big tower tests, and you just don't need it. Finally, you do not need a companion cube. Please don't put companion cubes in all of your tests. There's no joke anymore when there's a million of them. If there's just one and you have to incinerate it, that's the joke. Now, if you have a test where you are meant to bring the companion cube from chamber to chamber to chamber, that would be an appropriate use for it because that was the purpose of it in the original game. But if you're just using it where another cube would do, there's really no need. So what do you need to make a good test? First, good lighting. I'm putting this first because it's so basic, it's so easy to add. Even without any idea what you're doing for your test or what the ultimate puzzle is, you can start adding lights to it. When you start rearranging your chamber, you're going to have to move some of them. That's okay, it doesn't take that long. You can highlight a whole wall and delete all the lights on it at once if for whatever reason you have to redo that wall. But please put good lighting in your test. You need a good layout. You don't need a specific layout, but you need a layout that makes sense for your concept. Make the target element visible from where the player hits the button, whether it's through glass, it's through a fizzler, it's on the other side of some partition. It can be in a different room, but if you make the player able to see it, they know what they've done. Don't make it needlessly hard for the player to have to get from point A to point B. Third, you need an appropriate size. If you have 4 puzzle elements, you do not need a huge chamber. If you have 30 puzzle elements, you don't need to cram them into a tiny chamber either. And it's not just a ratio to the elements. It's depending on how much space the player needs to move, how much visibility you want to give them to other objects, how much space you need for your antline trails to the objects, how far is it to the exit, does the player know where the exit is. You want the chamber sized appropriately for the type of puzzle you're trying to create. The fourth thing you're going to need for a really good test is rigorous play testing. Don't play your map once and think that it's solvable, therefore it's ready to be published. I play test my maps probably 30 or 40 times before I get my wife to play test for me. And I watch my wife play test, I watch over her shoulder, it drives her kind of nuts, but the point of it is to see what she walks in and sees and does. And usually within seconds, no matter how many times I've played it myself, within seconds I see something. Her eye didn't get drawn to a certain part of the room. Or, you know, she could break the test. She could walk in and find a way to solve it that I never intended because I made a portal wall that skips part of the puzzle. You need someone else besides you to play these tests for you and show you some of these things. And the last thing you need for a great test, in my opinion, is you need a clear goal for the player. You need the player to know what he's driving towards. Don't have the player walk in and see, dozens of buttons and no clue what they all do. You don't have to show the player where the exit is, but if you don't show him the exit, at least show him something else to strive for. The last thing I want to share with you before I show you examples of these tests is my personal favorite kind of test. First, it has a lot of thought to solve. It's a test that you could spend a lot of time in, and you feel like the answer is staring you in the face, but you're not quite there yet. And what does it have less of? Fewer puzzle elements. A test with a high ratio of thought and time to solve, but very few puzzle elements are my absolute favorite test. You don't have to agree with me on that. It's just something that I look for. Now I would just like to take a minute. I'm going to show you a couple of tests that meet these requirements. I'm going to show you two of them, actually. I'm going to show you one from Valve to show you that they actually use the same type of design philosophy that I'm advocating here. And second, a very popular test by a user that shows you don't need hammer. So let's look first at what Valve has done for a test. This just happens to be one of my favorites. It doesn't have to be one of yours. It was one with very little to it that took me a little bit of time to solve when I first saw it. I want you to look. There are only 3 puzzle elements in this test, and it's remained one of my favorites no matter how many puzzles I play. My brain comes back to this test as one that initially really stumped me, but when I got to the solution it was very simple. But 3 puzzle elements. Now let's look at the lighting. You can see it's easy to see everything. And look at the size. It's not a huge vault. You don't have tons of space to cross for no reason. There is a clear goal for the player, and the goal for the player is to get to the exit. So you can see the good layout. It's clear what everything does. You have a laser that's pointed over there. That line, without even activating anything, you can tell that platform is going to raise when I put the laser there. The light bridge will stay on no matter what. And this button will open the exit. So the player has a goal. He needs to have the exit open, and he needs to be on that elevator. These are very clear. And even more basic than that, the player's first goal is much easier. And I just love this. This is why Valve is so genius. The first goal is much simpler. Get the cube. Give your players something easy to go after right away. Something that's not like they didn't put the cube right at the entrance of the test. The cube wasn't here, for instance. It was somewhere that was easy enough to get to with a portal, but they didn't give the player the cube. They just made it one small goal for the player to get. That's where you feel very satisfied when you're playing these puzzles, is you have a series of small goals, and each one you cross, you feel gratified that you've solved it. So the obvious thing then is to put the cube on that button, which raises the elevator. The laser has raised the elevator, and the cube has opened the exit. But I'm not on the elevator, and most players will be very familiar with this puzzle by now, and you probably know the exact solution, but that's not the point. The point is that when I first walked in here, the first time I played this game, I had no idea how I could be on the elevator and keep this cube on this button. And it's only took 3 elements to build a puzzle that initially stumped me, but the fact that it stumped me was gratifying to fix. No threat of death. If you want to build Portal 3, or your vision of what Portal 3 ought to be, you probably need hammer. But if you just want to make a good test with a few elements, you only need the puzzle maker. Now I'm going to pick one of my favorites, and one of the earliest popular community chambers. And let's just see. This is Gate by Mevius. He won the Aperture Employee of the Moment award, which I thought was hilarious. And I want you to notice again, there are only 3 puzzle elements, including the only hazard, which happens to be Death Gel or Death Water, Death Goo. I've seen it by different names. So let's look at this chamber. First of all, notice how brightly lit it is. This chamber is really easy to see everything that's going on. Second, you can see the exit. So you already have your ultimate goal in mind. You need to somehow cross this pit, and but that's not your first goal, because you come in and you want to play with the buttons and see what they do. One button turns off the fizzler, the other one activates the excursion funnel, and there's a button over there that gets the cube. So again, the player has a first goal, which is let's get the cube. And it's pretty easy, actually. This first part of the puzzle is the easiest part. I won't solve the whole thing again if you haven't played it, because this test was a lot of fun to solve the first time. Just giving the player something easy to go after in small steps. That cube is respawning. He hasn't made it ridiculously hard to get back over here and do this. There we go, and I don't want to destroy the cube. So that's just part one. There's another part to this puzzle that I won't give away, but my point in showing you this is to show you that with very few elements, just a couple of buttons, an excursion funnel, the exit and a cube, and a fizzler, there's not a whole lot going on. A little bit of a hazard here, which you notice Mabius didn't put this gel in to try and trick the player into falling into the water. It's just there to sort of control the player's movement and inform the layout of the map. That's all. So, 2 chambers, and the first time I saw this puzzle, you know, if you're cleverer than me, maybe it didn't take you very long, but first time I came into this chamber, I solved that portion there with the cube very quick, which is why I don't mind giving it away. But the rest of the test actually took me quite a while, but it was that flash of intuition that got me over the hump that I thought, oh, I can do this. And if you know the solution, you know it's very simple. It takes you a minute to get there. Those to me are the best kinds of tests. Those tests that there's not much to them, but the longer you play them, you feel like you're staring the answer in the face. You don't have to kill the player. You don't have to overwhelm them with tons of elements. You don't have to inundate them with death. You don't need a gorgeous hammer editor. You can tell, if we look again, that this chamber was just created, or could have been created at least, in the Puzzle Maker without anything fancy from Hammer. And there's not a lot to it, but the test was fun to play, and after playing all the single-player campaign inside and out, I had no idea what the solution for this test was when I first played it. That's what makes a great puzzle. Thanks for watching, and as always to all of you, thanks for mapping.